My name's Betty Halden. Born and raised in a forgettable corner of Ohio, I moved to Boulder, Colorado 10 years ago and never looked back. I built myself from scratch. Real estate became my weapon and money, my armor. But even with all the square footage and granite countertops in the world, nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your own family sees you as the expendable one. It started on a Thursday. My mother, Cheryl Halden, known for her passive-aggressive charm and pathological talent for guilt, left me a voice message. Her tone was sugar-dipped but flat underneath, like she'd practiced it for someone she didn't like. "Hey, sweetie," she said. "Just wanted to let you know the Hartfield Ridge trip is off this year. Your father's been tired. Meredith's dealing with some anxiety, and, well, it's just a low-budget year. We're all laying low. I know you'll understand." I stared at the message in disbelief. The Hartfield Ridge weekend was our family's tradition. Once a year, everyone gathered at the posh country club just outside Lexington, Kentucky. Golf, spa treatments, wine tastings. It was the one time we all pretended we weren't a collection of resentments and secrets. I understood all right. I understood that I was being cut out. Again. 2 days later, I opened Instagram while sipping a burnt coffee from the office break room. That's when I saw it. A slideshow, posted by my sister Meredith, blonde, surgically symmetrical, and emotionally stunted. She was glowing in every photo, her perfect teeth reflecting the chandeliers above her. The caption, "Another beautiful Halden weekend at Hartfield Ridge." I nearly dropped my phone. They were all there: Mom, Dad, Meredith, Aunt Lisa, that Botox vulture. Even freaking Uncle Dean, who hasn't shown up for a Christmas since 2012. They were drinking champagne and dressed like the cast of some reality show about fake wealth. I zoomed in on one photo. The date was unmistakable. It was the same weekend Mom said the trip was off. I felt the sting, sharp and immediate. Not even a lie of necessity, just a lie of exclusion. I didn't say anything, not to Meredith, not to Dad, not to Aunt Lisa. I waited. Sat on it like a storm gathering in my gut. Then, as if they hadn't insulted me enough, my mother sent me a text the next morning. "Can you send $2,000 for the mortgage? We're short this month, the mortgage." I stared at those words until they blurred. That's when the coldness settled into me. That brutal, silent kind of rage that doesn't scream or sob, it sharpens. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Not the way I smile at buyers touring a property. Not the way I smile at dinner with investors. No, this was different. This smile tasted like rusted metal and burned bridges. It stretched across my face like a scar. I had the money. Hell, I had triple that in my checking account alone. I just closed a 3-bedroom colonial in Crestview Hills with a $15,000 commission. But that wasn't the point. They lied to me. They partied without me. And then had the audacity to ask me for help as if I were just a wallet with a pulse. I sent the money. Precisely $2,000. No more, no less. But I added a message. "Next time at least pretend I don't exist with more class." And I meant every word. I sat at my desk, watching the Denver skyline melt into the horizon. My reflection in the glass was unfamiliar, hard, colder than the snow-capped peaks beyond. This wasn't going to be one of those petty family squabbles where we cried and hugged and moved on. No, this was war. And wars aren't won with forgiveness. They're won with strategy. I started keeping a folder. A real one, black leather, zippered, with the word Halden written in red Sharpie across the front. Inside, I began documenting everything. Photos, screenshots, bank statements. Meredith's influencer deals she wasn't reporting to the IRS. Dad's shady consulting invoices to non-existent companies. And Mom, God bless her, she'd left a paper trail so wide it could be seen from space. I wasn't just going to get even. I was going to get ahead. And then I was going to leave them behind, for good. That night, I drove to a little diner just outside downtown. The kind of place with bad lighting and even worse coffee, but it was quiet and anonymous. I brought my notebook, the leather folder, and my appetite for revenge. I made a list. 1. Take back what's mine. 2. Cut every tie that bleeds. 3. Burn the bridge. Salt the ashes. They had made a critical mistake confusing my silence for weakness. But I'm not weak. I never was. I was just patient. And now I was done waiting. There's a house in Durham Pines, Georgia, 5 miles from Savannah, tucked behind a row of rustling pecan trees in wide, lying skies. White shutters, blue trim, a porch that wraps around like a hug it never truly gives. People call it charming. I call it a lie in paint and lumber. It belonged to my grandparents, Joseph and Lillian Halden. When they were alive, the house was our church. Sunday dinners, summer weddings, Christmases that smelled like cinnamon and dysfunction. But when they died, the house turned cold. Not physically, just spiritually. It passed to all of us. Mom, Dad, Meredith, and me. A four-way split that sounds fair on paper but tastes like poison when you're the only one keeping it alive. The taxes came like clockwork, maintenance bills, storm repairs. But Meredith was too busy blowing money in Los Angeles pretending to be a lifestyle guru. Mom cried broke every time I asked for help. And Dad? He was funneling whatever cash he had into a consulting business registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. Guess who kept that house from being swallowed by liens? Me. I paid every damn cent, quietly, without applause, for years. Until I didn't, one cold November night. I sat on the back porch of that house with a bottle of Tennessee whiskey and a spreadsheet of my family's debts. That's when it hit me. I didn't have to burn the whole forest to win. I just needed to own the land beneath their feet. So I got creative. Meredith had $20,000 in credit card debt. I called the collections agency and negotiated it down to $12,500, paid it off. In return, she signed over her portion of the deed with a digitally notarized signature and a clueless smile. Told her it was part of a refinancing opportunity. She didn't even read the paperwork. Just asked if I could Venmo her another $400 for eyelash extensions. Mom was trickier. Her name still held emotional weight, the way mold does in an old house. But she had a stack of unpaid hospital bills from when she faked a back injury to get out of work for 9 months. I offered to pay it all, in full. She cried when the check cleared. Sighed, "You're my rock, Betty." Then she signed her portion of the deed with shaking hands and blind trust. Dad? That coward practically begged me to buy him out. Something about a lawsuit in Baltimore, a missing business partner, and needing to lay low for a while. I wired him $15,000 and told him to disappear. He didn't even ask what he was signing, just wanted the cash. 3 bouts. All legal, all clean. And within 3 months, the house in Durham Pines was mine. I didn't tell them right away. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I sent them hand-stitched invitations. Cream envelopes, gold lettering, a weekend of healing, family retreat at the old Halden house. Mom called first, surprised I even wanted to host. Are you okay? She asked, voice riddled with fake concern. Better than I've been in years, I said. It's time we reconnect. Meredith chimed in next. Will there be photo ops? Rustic backdrops? She asked. Of course. Even Dad said he'd fly in from Florida. Claimed he had some ideas for fixing our bond. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. They arrived on a Friday. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. I had the house scrubbed spotless, cozy lights. Homemade candles, like a southern postcard. They smiled, hugged me like nothing had ever happened, and walked straight into my trap. I made them breakfast the next morning, grits, eggs, biscuits so buttery they stuck to your soul. I added a splash of bourbon to the coffee, just enough to keep them warm and off balance. We ate on the porch, the cicadas humming in rhythm with my heart. Then I brought out the envelope, 4 sets of documents. Titles, deeds, receipts, a notarized letter from my attorney confirming the transfer of ownership. Their names removed. My name, printed bold and unapologetic. I wanted you all to see what I've been working on, I said, voice steady. Welcome to my house. They blinked, confused at first. Then came the silence, dense, vibrating. I could feel it sink into the bones of the porch. Mom stared at the papers like they were written in a language she'd never learned. Meredith's face turned white, then red, then nothing. Dad stood up, paced, sat back down. You're joking, Mom finally said. No, I replied. You signed it all away. I bought you out. All of you, legally, quietly, while you were too busy playing pretend. This isn't right, Meredith hissed. You tricked us. I leaned forward, smiling. No, I gave you what you wanted: money, freedom, space, and I took what I deserved. For years I paid for this house while you played martyrs. That's over now. Dad tried to speak, but I cut him off. You sold me your dignity for 15 grand and a plane ticket. Save the lecture. No one spoke after that. I let the silence linger. Let it burn. Let it etch itself into the walls of that house, so that every creak, every draft would carry the echo of this moment. They left that afternoon. No hugs, no thanks. Just fury and embarrassment trailing behind them like bad perfume. I watched their cars disappear down the gravel road, my hand resting on the porch rail, steady and satisfied. That night, I stood in the upstairs hallway where Grandma Lillian used to keep her sewing cabinet. I lit a match and watched the shadows stretch long against the pine-wood floors. This house was mine now. Not because they gave it to me, but because I took it. Strategically, ruthlessly. Some people inherit power, others earn it. Me? I reclaimed it. And this was just the beginning. A week after the showdown at Durham Pines, when the dust had barely settled and the silence from my family felt thick enough to chew, I received an envelope, cream-colored, thin, foreign. It was postmarked from Brighton, England. At first, I assumed it was junk, some catalog or real estate pitch. But then I saw the sender's name, scrawled in uneven cursive on the back. Lisa A. Halden, Aunt Lisa, the ghost in the family photo. The woman who never stood up for herself, who followed behind Mom like a pale shadow. She was always the type to flinch before she spoke. I never took her seriously, until that morning. Inside was a letter. 4 pages, no greeting, no small talk, just a confession. She said she was tired of watching me get punished for being the only one in the family with a spine. Tired of watching my mother spin lies like silk and wrap the rest of them in it. But mostly she was tired of guilt because she had been complicit. And she wanted out. It started with my grandfather Joseph Halden. Before he died, he opened a private trust in London, held in an offshore account under the name Halden Bloodline Trust. The fund held over £180,000. Not millions, but enough to change a life. The conditions were simple. It would go only to the eldest daughter who remained loyal to the bloodline. Joseph's words, not mine. It meant me, born first. Never married. Never changed my name. I carried the Halden name like a badge because I had no choice but to make it powerful. But 10 years ago, my mother forged the access documents. She used my social security number, but changed the name to Meredith's. Aunt Lisa had seen the paperwork at first by accident. A misplaced folder. A hurried apology. She had helped cover it up. She never said a word, until now. That's when I stopped smiling. Because this wasn't just some snub at a family party. This wasn't social games or pettiness. This was theft. Cold, calculated theft. They hadn't just pushed me out of a memory, they robbed me of a future. And the worst part? They had the audacity to beg me for help while they lived off stolen money that had my name written all over it. I sat there in my office, the sunlight hitting the windows of my downtown Boulder condo, watching the dust spin in the air while my entire understanding of the last decade rearranged itself. I thought of the times Mom had borrowed money. The vacations Meredith bragged about. The investment Dad made in a non-existent startup. They used my legacy to fund their lies. And now I was going to unravel every last thread. I booked a flight to London, first class, no apologies. Then I called Vincent Lake, a private investigator based in Manchester. Ex-military, reputation for discretion, and more importantly, results. I told him exactly what I wanted. Find every name attached to that withdrawal trail. Bank statements, passport scans, anything they touched. I want evidence. I want photos. Hell, I want voices if you can get them. Vincent didn't ask questions, he just said, "Give me 4 days." When I landed at Heathrow, I went straight to a hotel near Soho, overlooking the Thames. I wasn't here to sightsee. I was here to reclaim what was mine and destroy anyone who stood in my way. 2 days later, I got an encrypted file from Vincent. He'd pulled the full transaction history. Meredith had withdrawn over £120,000. Over the last 8 years in chunks of £5,000. Masking the trail to make it look like expense reimbursements from a dummy corporation she registered under the name Halden and Rowe Ltd. Every single transfer was linked to a forged identity using my information, my birth year, my tax ID, even my Colorado address at the time. Mom had signed off on the notarization herself. Using a crooked contact in New York, Dad had written reference letters to the London bank to vouch for a Meredith Halden, a person who never legally existed, and I had proof of every word. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. My hands didn't shake. I felt nothing but a clear, dangerous kind of focus. The kind that pushes you past morality and into the realm of precision. I called Vincent again. I need a certified forensic accountant, I said. Someone with teeth. I want a report I can take to the courts, the press, hell, the feds if I have to. I know a guy, he said. Within 3 days, I had it. A full report tracing the stolen funds, the forged IDs, the fake corporation, 70 pages. Bound and bulletproof. And I wasn't going to threaten them with it. No, that's what they'd expect. Instead, I called a meeting. Sent out emails, formal, cold. Subject, Halden Family Trust, urgent in-person discussion. Location, Darren Pines, date, Saturday, attendance mandatory. They came, of course, curious, nervous, still convinced they could twist their way out of anything. That was their fatal mistake. They walked into the living room of my house like they still owned it. I let them sit, let them ask questions. Then I dropped the folder on the table. This is the proof, I said. Of everything: theft, fraud, identity crimes, international financial abuse. Meredith paled. Mom tried to speak, but I held up a hand. No apologies, no tears. You all had 10 years to do the right thing. Instead, you stole from me. You faked my life and spent my future. Dad stood, trembling. Betty, listen. Sit down, I snapped. He did. I continued. Here's what's going to happen. You will wire me the remaining £60,000 by the end of next week. You will sign public affidavits admitting wrongdoing, and then you will vanish. No interviews, no pushback, no lawsuits. Or I go to the press, to the authorities, to anyone who'll listen. Silence. Meredith began to cry. Mom looked like she was about to faint. But I didn't care anymore. This isn't revenge, I said. This is correction. They thought they buried me in silence and shame. But they forgot one thing about women like me: we bloom in dirt. And now it was their turn to choke on the roots. I wanted to watch them burn, but with class. So I threw a party, not just any party. This wasn't about balloons or laughter. This was about presentation. Truth, served on silver platters garnished with humiliation. I invited everyone: Mom, Meredith, Dad, and Aunt Lisa. The whole sickly beautiful Halden web. The invitation read like redemption. Let's begin again. One evening, one house, one truth. They bit, of course they did. They thought I was turning over a new leaf, that my trip to England had healed something, that buying the house in Darren Pines had softened me, that I wanted to forgive. They had no idea the leaf I'd turned over was lined with arsenic. I hosted the event in my Boulder condo. The downtown skyline gleamed in the distance, lights flickering like eyes. I hired a caterer. Wine poured like blood into crystal glasses. A string quartet played softly in the corner. I wore black silk elegant, severe. The kind of dress you wear to a funeral you secretly enjoy. By 7:30, everyone had arrived. Meredith looked like she always did, polished, artificial, clueless. Her designer clutch screamed, influencer money, even though I knew most of it was still stolen from my trust. Mom wore pearls, her expression strained and syrupy. She kissed my cheek like a snake kisses before it strikes. Dad wore cologne thick enough to gag a corpse and tried to shake my hand like we were business partners. I didn't take it. Aunt Lisa hovered near the bar, sipping wine nervously. She knew what was coming. I could see it in the way her hand trembled when she lifted her glass. At precisely 8 p.m., I stood in front of the room with a glass of wine in one hand and a USB drive in the other. Thank you for coming, I said. My voice was calm, controlled, razor-sharp. They all quieted. I know you thought tonight would be about reconciliation. But the truth is, this is a reckoning. I walked to the TV, slid the USB into the port, and hit play. The screen lit up. Silence fell like a guillotine. First, photos. Meredith at the London bank, signing withdrawal slips under the name Meredith Halden. The passport with her face and my information. Clear, high-res images Vincent had secured. A timestamp in the corner of every frame. Then the documents. Bank records. A detailed audit. Transfers traced from the Halden Bloodline Trust to a fake consulting firm. Halden and Rowe Limited, each one signed and approved with a forged digital signature that mimicked mine. Next, emails. Mom, writing to a banker named Stewart with language so desperate, it was practically oozing. Pleading for early access. Offering to handle Betty's end of the paperwork. Finally, the trust itself. The original will from my grandfather, my name bold and untouched. Then, beneath it, the altered version. My name scratched out, Meredith's handwritten, faint and sloppy. They watched in horror. When it ended, I turned to them. Meredith's face was ashen. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. You invaded my life, she whispered. No, darling, I said coldly. You stole mine. Mom didn't speak. Her mouth was parted, her fingers clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She looked old, not aged, just exposed. Dad stood, muttered something about misunderstanding, and made for the door. You leave now. You won't have the chance to explain to a judge, I said sharply.
He froze. I looked at them, each of them, and let the rage rise. Not loud, not wild, but pure, focused.
I gave you a chance, I said. All of you. After the house, after I found out about the trust, I waited. I offered you silence. I offered you peace. I offered you mercy. You could have confessed. You didn't. You thought I was too soft, too distant, too stupid. I paced slowly, circling them like a lion. You buried me with lies, and you built your fake lives on top of my bones. Well, here's the news flash. I don't stay buried. Meredith began to sob. Betty, please. You bought handbags with my inheritance, I snapped. You posted spa retreats on Instagram with my future. You faked my damn signature. I could send you to prison for that. Mom finally spoke. It wasn't meant to hurt you. We just thought you wouldn't use it. You were always so distant. Distant? I barked a laugh. No, I was just awake while you all sleepwalked through your entitled lives. Then I pulled the final card from my pocket. A letter. Official, sealed. I've already filed charges with a federal financial crimes investigator, I said. Fraud. Identity theft. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The report is already in motion. Their faces twisted, but I'm offering you one last choice. I slid a folder across the table. Pay me back, all of it. Every pound. Every cent, publicly confess. Sign over anything tied to my trust, and disappear. No media, no lawsuits, no more family. You do that and I'll make this quietly vanish. The room stood frozen. No, I added, stepping closer to Meredith. Then I'll enjoy watching you trade that designer dress for an orange jumpsuit. Your followers can like that from a prison account. Silence, just the soft hum of the quartet still playing, unaware they were scoring the ruins of a family. Eventually, Mom stood, her legs shook. I'll sign, she said, voice brittle. We'll do it. Meredith nodded, numb. Dad didn't argue. Aunt Lisa whispered, I'm sorry. For once I believed her. One by one they left, no hugs, no goodbyes. Just shadows slinking back to the smallness they belonged to. And me? I walked the halls of my condo like a queen. My heels echoed on the hardwood floor slow, final. I poured myself a drink. Sat by the window. Watched the lights of Boulder flicker like they were bowing to me. No more fake apologies. No more text messages begging for money. No more pretending they ever loved me. They thought they buried me in silence and shame. But I dug myself out, with bare hands, with evidence, with rage, and now? Now I own the shovel.